Hello and welcome to Birth Talk with Lynn and Jody. Today our topic is breastfeeding compatible with a civilized society? Welcome, Jody.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
I suspect that we are going to need to do this in two parts, so maybe you can come back next week or next time because there's a lot to cover. And Jody's an excellent one to have on for this topic. I would say you've had 50 years of thought, experience, thinking, observation, activism, encouragement.
Actually, more like 60. Because I started before I was 10 years old.
Started what? Observing?
Observing and questioning.
Very good. It's so good to question. When we question, we learn.
I think my first memory of going, I wonder what that's all about, was when I was 6.
Wow. See, I don't even know. It came into my consciousness way later. You grew up on a farm, so you definitely saw more biological processes, things about life.
If you had been responsible for killing an innocent critter, you would have probably remembered it too.
Wow. Wow. Very interesting. So anyway, welcome everybody. As you join in, feel free to leave us some comments or join in the conversation. Ask us any questions.
When we've missed something.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I would really like to start out with maybe a little history of breastfeeding, where we went wrong, why not many people aren't really doing it. It doesn't seem to be the norm that when you look around, you see more bottles than breastfeeding in public. At least that's what I think I see. You see embarrassment about it. You see rationalization. Women, I think, know that breastfeeding is best, but they rationalize, well, the baby got 2 weeks of breastfeeding, so at least he or she got off to a good start. It's a very, very charged issue. And so maybe you can talk about, we're going to talk about boobs today and breasts and what are they for? And, things are misplaced and upside down when you look at.
Can we start off with an image of a standard of beauty for the female breast?
Okay, sure. An image of standard beauty. Okay, I've got a lot to say about that. Can I give my opinions? Because that right there is making me feel a lot. What I feel is I see her boobs and I focus in on them. She's a beautiful woman. I think it's Rihanna. And it's as if we have sexualized the breast. So when I see that, it makes me think of a book I have by Gail Dines. I link that kind of picture to the books such as Pornland, How Porn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality. What I see in that is a man will look at that and see her boobs and not really care about her, that she's the focal point of the picture are her breasts. And I feel it opens up for objectification of women. I see it stirs up a lot of negative things to me. The pink is pretty and feminine and the pastel color, but I associate.
And I look at this. Whoops.
Yep.
And I'd like to look like that. Not for anybody, just for myself. And the truth is, at one time I did look like that.
Okay.
And that was when I was lactating.
Ah.
When the milk first comes in, the breasts are quite engorged and very full and round and beautifully shaped.
Okay.
And it's interesting to me that the standard of beauty, as far as male imagery, for the female breast is a breast that is full of milk.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Do you think men in general did not get breastfed when they were babies, and so it's a focal point?
No man or woman, I'll include women, ever gets enough.
Okay.
And the breast is, if it's used appropriately, in a time-honored way, represents warmth, safety, love, compassion, concern, time, and who doesn't want that?
Right.
But when we focus on the image and don't pay attention to the real human being that's behind that image, then that is sexualization, because it's sexual imagery without relationship or intimacy.
Okay. When I see that picture, I see silicone. I don't see natural.
Well, if she's breastfeeding, it's natural.
Okay.
It's probably been enhanced with some, shapers or tape or, whatever is used to enhance the female form to give it the appearance of a woman who is filled with the desire to share her breasts, because when our breasts are that full of milk, we desperately want to nurse somebody.
Interesting.
I had an incident many years ago where one of my friend's daughters became pregnant out of wedlock. And she's a lovely, lovely young woman, and her intended was a lovely, lovely man. They were going to get married as soon as she finished her degree, which would have meant the baby would have been several months old. I mean, they weren't going to get married before the baby was born, but they were going to get married, but they were time honoring some other issues in their lives.
Okay.
And she became tremendously engorged shortly after the baby's birth. And this guy is just, John Q. Public. He doesn't know anything special, he's just an average guy. He's a nice guy, but he's just an average guy. And her breasts were so full of milk, and her nipples were so tender. And when you're that full of milk, it's really hard for the baby to grasp the nipple.
Okay.
Because, it's not softened. And he took it upon himself to soften her breasts by drinking her milk.
Okay.
So that it would be easier for the baby to nurse once the breast had been softened somewhat. This guy didn't know anything more than anybody else, but yet he offered something that was an immediate solution to her problem. And he didn't read a book. She didn't ask him for this. He offered.
That's great.
Yeah, I thought, I'd marry that guy.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people would think that's grotesque, and I'm sorry to say.
Well, it's definitely one of the what do you call an issue that polite people don't talk about?
Uptight, forbidden,
Taboo.
Taboo, yes.
Yeah. Men nursing is still a taboo subject. And you know that because it's not a part of the pornographic images.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I was visiting a group in upstate New York that had been getting together for years and years and years. A leche leader, a doula, a midwife, childbirth educator. I mean, it was like my people.
Yeah.
And I was invited to join their little group. And I tested the air, and it seemed safe enough. And so I decided to ask a question that I've been wanting answered for a long time. And so I braved myself and I asked, do you share your milk with your husbands?
Uh-huh.
And they kind of looked at each other, like, is anybody going to speak up?
Yeah.
Who's going to go first? And slowly the women started going.
Yeah.
And this is something they had talked about everything. This is something they had never discussed.
Okay.
They all had shared their milk with their dearly beloveds. And I asked, does drinking your milk, or have you observed that drinking your milk changes his personality? And then again, there was a nod and some smiles, and well, he's kinder and gentler.
Okay.
He's kind of more like me, as far as being concerned and astute with the care of our children. And it feels like his warmth and love and time with them is as important to him as it is important to me. And again, this happened in New York. I was going up to Albany to meet with a friend that used to live in North Dakota. And I was standing on the platform and a lady came up to me and she said, where are you going? And I said, Albany. And she said, well, you need to be one, flight up to catch that bus. And she said, I'm going there too. And so we both went up the stairs and waited for the bus, and we got to visiting, and she told me the most amazing story. And I'm sorry I don't remember her name. She was at that time a little bit older than me. She was a lovely, lovely Black woman, and we just became, like that right away.
Yeah.
And she told me that I told her the work that I do, and she told me that she had wanted to breastfeed her son, her first son. And she ended up having a cesarean section. And she was told, since you had a cesarean, now this would have been 36 years ago.
Okay.
Because it was, 20. 42 years ago. It would have been 42 years ago that we had this conversation.
Okay.
And she said that she wasn't able to breastfeed, unfortunately. She had wanted to, but since she had a cesarean section, they said, now you can't. And so she cared for her delightful little son. And then they had another baby, and this was a boy too. And of course, since you've had one cesarean, you're going to have another one. Okay. And again, breastfeeding was out because she was having a cesarean.
Okay.
And she loved her sons, loved her husband, was working as a hairdresser. But what she really wanted to do more than anything else was get some education and work with special needs children.
Okay.
That's what she wanted. Well, as her children got older and went off to college and such, she had time to get this education. She found a program that she worked with in upstate New York, so she did have some travel issues. And working with these children, she said, my breast filled with milk.
Wow. Look at that.
And I jumped to a conclusion,
Uh-huh.
and I knew that she worked during the week, and then she went home to New York City on weekends. And I said, did your husband appreciate the change in you doing this work that you always wanted to do? She said, yes.
Oh, look at that.
And she said, he really looks forward to me coming home on weekends.
Uh-huh.
And she also said, oh, then I asked her the question, what has changed? Have you noticed any changes in him since you have been offering your milk on weekends? She said, he's kinder and gentler.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what does your husband do during the week? She said, he's a high-rise window washer.
Okay.
So here he is way up there washing windows. Can't wait for his wife to come home on the weekend.
Yeah, how nice. I think it lowers the testosterone, you know?
Well, testosterone is a good thing.
Yeah.
And if men have adequate stores of testosterone,
Mm-hmm.
and they feel their manliness,
Yeah.
they don't have to be bullies.
Right.
They don't have to be aggressive.
Okay.
I think they don't have to have a hot red sports car.
Mm-hmm.
I think men who have adequate stores of testosterone don't have to prove anything to anybody.
Okay.
I think it's a man who thinks he doesn't have enough that has to pretend that he's bigger, better, badder, more of this, more of that than the next guy.
Okay.
So I think, and women with testosterone, I don't think they become aggressive or mean-spirited. I think they become strong and capable and resourceful and, all the things that we would like to see in our women and our men.
Okay. Yeah, very
So
nice.
I don't think testosterone is the answer when it comes to unnecessarily aggressive behavior.
Okay.
I think it's that the man feels that he doesn't have enough.
All right. He's compensating for some insecurity, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Again, welcome. If anybody wants to type in any questions or comments, please do so. So let's go back to happier times where breastfeeding was the norm. Do you have anything culturally to share and maybe take us through how and when things have changed?
Okay. A couple of things. I'll go to the most recent first, and then I'll backtrack to the Stone Age, one of my favorite subjects. I was attending an Association for Pre and Perinatal Psychology conference, and there was a lovely woman who was giving a presentation on breastfeeding in the art world.
Okay.
And her focus was on cathedral paintings, the images and how Mary and Jesus are portrayed in the cathedrals throughout Europe.
Okay.
And what she discovered is early on, there was no reluctance to show Mary nursing her son.
Okay.
And as time went on, she became more covered. In fact, there was a painting that was being cleaned, or whatever they do with old art to bring back the colors and the original images. And they found that years after the original painting was done, which showed Mary actually nursing Jesus, someone had painted clothing over her breast, so it looked like she was just holding her baby like this, and that he wasn't actually nursing. And so something happened which caused the breast to become a source of anxiety.
Okay.
And I haven't been able to track what that is, but I do know that it had an impact on the cathedral art throughout Europe.
Okay.
And the farther away we came from that time of normalcy with the relationship between mothers and their babies, the farther away Jesus was from his mother's breast. First, Jesus was shown being breastfed, and then he was shown being held but not being breastfed, and then he was shown being on her lap. And then later on, we're talking about this change throughout centuries. And then he would be on her knee.
Mm.
And then from the knee, he went to the floor.
Okay.
And this was called the floor baby image, where Mary was sitting there and Jesus was on the floor, as far away from her breast as they could make it, and still look like, it was mother and son.
Mm-hmm.
And during this time, there was something going on where women were represented as the source of evil, probably Eve's original sin, and that the mothers were contaminating their sons, their children, with the spirit of their evil nature.
Oh, okay.
And so there was a desire to keep the mother and the baby separate, because they didn't want the baby, especially male babies, truthfulness.
Okay, can you repeat that? The screen froze for a second. Especially,
there was an effort to separate mothers and their babies, especially their sons, separate them from her sinfulness.
Right.
And it was also this time that I don't know about other religions, but in the Catholic Church there was a discussion over whether or not women actually had a soul. Okay. And there were plenty of experts that determined that she did not. That women didn't have this because of the bad thing that they did, way back with Eve. There's a very interesting book called The Anatomist. The author is Frederico Anastasia.
Okay, I think
The
you mentioned
Anatomist.
that. Yeah.
And it talks about the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries, where this anatomist was bound and determined to figure out whether or not women had a soul, and if they did have a soul, where was it? Okay. And one of the stories in there was the anatomist was also a renowned healer.
All right.
And one of the stories in this book, which is fiction, of course, but all fiction is based on something that someone believes to be true, or at least possible.
Yeah.
In this account, the priest was the Pope was very, very ill. Okay. And it was common for illnesses to be treated with the breast milk of a healthy maiden, a young rural woman. Okay. And this anatomist thought that something very powerful and very significant was lost if the milk touched air. Okay. So therefore, the milk has to be taken directly from the breast, so it doesn't touch air and lose its power.
I see.
When someone is breastfeeding, they're swallowing the milk, but there's also a backflow thing where the organisms from the person who is nursing actually go into the mother's or the woman's breast. Okay. And those organisms can be checked out by her immunological inventory. Mm-hmm. And if she has been exposed to something like that, something similar, then her body will produce antibodies, and then it will be present in the next day's milk. Okay. And so by him nursing on her directly, he's actually helping her body to produce the substance that will help him recover from his illness.
Nice. Yeah.
And of course, the Pope did recover, and this guy was heralded as like one of the greatest healers of all time. And I just thought, that whole segment, because nobody writes like that.
Yeah.
We don't write that about throbbing loins and all this stuff in relationship to where a woman is in her fertility cycle.
Mm-hmm.
There is one woman that has folded that into her novels, and I believe her name is starts with a K. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got her books at home. I'll bring one next time.
Okay.
Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver.
Okay.
Wrote in at least one of her books the relationship to this woman feeling wanton and where she was in her ovulatory cycle.
Okay.
And I really wish that people would honor and respect the cycles that we go through and how it affects who we're attracted to. Men are in that cycle all the time.
Right.
In fact, my dad and I were having a conversation about when our dairy cows were in heat.
Okay.
And what signs to look for, and they get like this, and they start humping each other, and their eyes get kind of glassy and unfocused, and to look for. And if you notice this in any of our cows, tell me, and I'll keep an eye on them so that we can make sure that they're bred at the right time.
Okay.
And so it was very easy for me to translate how animals behave when they're in estrus.
Okay.
And that women also have the same capacity to notice things about a man that they may not have noticed the week before.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to some young men, and one guy said, well, she was just on. And then when I called her for another date, she wasn't the least bit interested. What's going on? Mm-hmm. I said, well, she was probably ovulating. Yeah. And, you never want to develop that close of a relationship with someone until you at least know what their cycles are and how they behave or how they react at different times in their cycle. And there are times that women just want to be left alone, and that has to be honored. And there are times that they really want to be close. Mm-hmm. And, you want to be there. But she's not going to be the same every week. And you have to understand that. That's why she seems flighty. She's not what her telling her to do.
Yeah. Now we have to throw something into the mix, though. And women who are on birth control pills.
It's important to be aware of it.
Yeah. Sorry. Sometimes you're lagging out for just a second or two, but I think we can still understand what you're saying. But what I wanted to say was, in our culture, many women are on birth control pill or hormonal contraception, which is not going to give the accurate rapport that a man and a woman need sexually. And women don't know this.
When we're talking about men who have behaved badly, and inappropriately, if they are to be released or whatever, or they have a choice between being released and chemical castration.
Oh, interesting.
And chemical castration is such a controversial subject for men who have shown themselves to be pedophiles. It's like, you're messing with, his basic, it's like cutting off his testicles, right. But you do it chemically. But yet hardly anyone raises an eyebrow when we have chemically castrated a whole generation of women, because that's what hormone-based birth control is. It is chemical castration.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And there's a very interesting book called The Garden of Fertility by Katie Singer.
Oh, I have one of her books. Yes.
And she talks about the personality changes during a woman's ovulatory cycle, and that it has an impact on her emotions, her intellect, her curiosity, her behavior. And she also had some photographs taken of women's cervixes who were on the pill and women's cervixes who were doing their natural cycles.
Yeah.
And the cervix of the woman who was on hormone-based birth control was like this. Every day of the month.
Like no her change. Attitude, her, what do you mean?
The way her cervix looked did not change. It was static.
Okay.
It was stuck.
Yeah.
Okay. And when the photographs of the woman who was doing her natural cycle, it was like.
Yeah. Good.
There was personality there.
Right.
And then I volunteered to her something that I thought would have been significant, which is our brains continue to develop until approximately the age of 25. And so if a young woman starts using artificial hormone-based birth control before the age of 25, she can get stuck in the angst of adolescence.
Wow.
Because the brain is still forming.
Yeah.
And if her brain is telling her, this is the way it is like. And if a woman starts taking or using hormone-based contraceptives after the age of 25, it still has an impact on her. But it doesn't change, her sense of normal for the rest of her life. It has an impact, but not near the impact that it would have if she started taking it when she was in her teens or early 20s.
Okay.
And I have talked to so many young men who have said, where can I find a clear-thinking, intelligent, resourceful, creative woman? I'm looking for marriage. I'm looking for the mother of my children. And the women out there are dumb as rocks.
Yeah.
All they do is gossip and shop, and they spend more money on shoes and makeup than they do on books. They don't know how to have. He said, one gal, I just had sex with her because she was too boring to talk to.
Yeah.
Which I don't recommend. But, he was trying to explain to me how things were out there.
Yeah.
And so we are actually sacrificing ourselves by chemically avoiding a pregnancy. We're actually chemically avoiding our best selves.
Yeah, good point.
Some of the most interesting women I have ever met are women who were very precocious as teenagers. Some of these precocious young women got pregnant.
Okay.
And because of who they knew or what they knew or were working, they decided they were going to have this baby at home. Or they decided that they were going to have a midwife instead of a doctor. And then they decided, no matter what anybody says, they're going to breastfeed.
Okay.
And so their brain is bathed in these incredible hormones of a great birth and a great breastfeeding experience and all the empathy that passes between the mom and the baby. And when this woman is 20 years old, 40 years old, 60 years old, it still has an impact on her. When I meet a woman who's like incredibly creative and resourceful,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised to find out that she had a baby in her teens and breastfed.
Interesting.
Because it seems to set her up for being an amazing woman in her later years.
Wow. That's good news about early pregnancy and early, yeah.
Well, I would not advocate for a young woman to have a pregnancy so this can happen for her.
Correct.
But I would be in favor of saying to the young woman, if you're not intending to breastfeed your child, you really need to seriously consider releasing it for adoption. Because a young woman who doesn't have the structure, the resources, the strength to manage her life is going to be a less than desirable candidate for motherhood during those tender years.
Yeah.
Especially if they do to her, and they is, we all know who they is. I was taking the bus back and forth in North Dakota when I lived there, and I would meet young men and young women who are at the, what do they call it now? It was like a discipline school for incorrigible teenagers. Okay. And one of the first things they do with these young women, is get them on birth control pills.
Wow.
And I think it's important to not have an unintended pregnancy, but I think it would be far more therapeutic, helpful, and healthy to teach these women their fertility signs.
Exactly. I wanted to do a show. I've been trying to invite someone on to talk about NFP. In this coronavirus crisis, there was talk where it's not essential for women to go and refill their birth control. And so, wow, what a great time to introduce to people to learn your own fertility, natural family planning, or fertility awareness method. And, Mother Teresa in Calcutta in the slums with what we would say disadvantaged, poor, uneducated people. She had great success teaching women about their bodies. So it can be done, and it's not a shock. And I can tell you, I am in superior female reproductive health at my age because I've only did three or 4 years of birth control early on, got it out of my system. And I've really been trying to be in sync with my body's cues. And I've been rewarded and not had any problems, almost no problems all these years. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying when you understand and work in sync with your body, with nature, you get rewarded. You really do. But anyway, so we're going a little off topic, but it's a good topic. Let's go back.
I want to say something else real quick about my experience with birth control pills.
Okay.
I started taking birth control pills 2 weeks before my wedding, and showed up at our honeymoon with a raging yeast infection.
Wow.
I didn't know, what the connection was, but this is something I'd never experienced before. And long story short, the birth control pills mimic the first trimester of pregnancy. Okay. Hormonally, it mimics a first trimester of pregnancy. And the first trimester of pregnancy, many of us remember, is very tender, tearful, needy. It's a time for eliminating from our lives that which does not make us whole.
Okay.
And so we send out these vibes to people. If you can't deal with a whole me, I need to know that, because some difficult times are coming, because I'm going to be having a baby and I'm going to need community and, sisterhood and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first trimester of pregnancy is designed to create in us a feeling of discernment.
Okay.
But if we are taking birth control pills and we're needy and weepy all the time,
yeah,
that gets really old.
Yeah.
Ask any husband.
Right.
It's not a happy place to be. And so I stopped taking the pill after about 6 months. I made the connection. The doctor that I was seeing refused to acknowledge that there was even a connection, not only between the pill and the yeast infections, but also the pill and my demeanor.
Right.
But I stopped anyway. It took me about a year, to start feeling whole again.
Wow. Very strong. Very strong. It altered your personality.
It altered my personality. It turned me from a fun, loving, resourceful, strong, creative woman who had a marvelous sense of humor, to someone who was weepy and needy, and
childish, maybe childish, like overly vulnerable.
Oh, really vulnerable.
Yeah. All right.
And easily hurt, easily wounded.
Yeah. All right. So I know we wanted to go back further to the history of breastfeeding, but I think I want to zone in on you very strongly believe the necessity to breastfeed, that it shouldn't be a choice, the necessity. You alluded to, if a young woman happens to get pregnant and she knows that she's decided, I will not babysit, I will not breastfeed this child. I said babysit because maybe she wants to have the baby babysat. I do not intend to breastfeed this baby, and I'm sure about that. And you're alluding to, well, perhaps she should give the baby up for adoption. She's not setting herself up for healthy attachment mothering, or especially that baby. So what is the importance and the necessity of breastfeeding for a more peaceful culture, for a happier baby, a more secure baby? What do you have to say about that?
Breastfeeding is good for babies. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
Breastfeeding is good for mothers.
Yeah.
One of the most important things about breastfeeding is it creates a situation in our minds and in our bodies where we find our children particularly charming.
Oh, yeah.
And a child that is charming is always going to be better cared for and safer than a child who is tedious.
Yep.
And for this young woman who finds herself pregnant, isn't that sweet?
I'm holding a picture because this baby, like many babies do, they play. They tweak the nipple or they stroke the mom. They're very happy. This is what a baby wants. The baby is very happy.
They have learned, patting her face. It actually makes the milk taste better. And so they have learned that if they're nice to their environment, which is their mother, that the milk will taste better. And, what's bad about that? So they learn, if I cooperate with my environment, if I'm nice to my environment, then my environment will be nice to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we want. We really don't want to put a bottle in a baby.
Now that we're celebrating Earth Day again, I'd like to point out the relationship between breastfeeding and environmental issues.
Okay.
When a baby is bottle fed, the bottle is either completely full or completely empty. There's either milk in the bottle or there's no milk in the bottle. And there's nothing the baby can do when the milk runs out to get more milk to come from the bottle. It's either full, there's either milk in there, or it's
empty. Okay.
Empty. And so the child grows up with, it's either there or it's not there. And if it's not there and I still want it, I'm SOL. I'm out of luck.
All right.
Now with the breastfed baby,
Yeah.
the baby nurses, and he's still hungry, and he very quickly realizes if he smiles at his mother,
Yeah.
if he pats her breast, if he strokes her face, she will have a secondary letdown reflex where the milk is richer and maybe even sweeter.
Yeah.
And is most satisfying.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do to a baby bottle to make the milk taste better.
Yeah.
Or to make it more satisfying. But if you're breastfeeding, there's something you can do with your environment, which will cause the mother's body to produce the milk that you need at that specific time. So as far as the environmental issues, if all we know how to do is take until it's gone, that's what we're going to do with our environment.
Okay.
If we know that there are things that we have to do to cooperate with our environment, we have to be nice to our environment so that our environment will meet our needs.
Okay.
So it's a very
symbiotic?
Yes, it's a symbiotic
relationship.
Thank you so much. And the relationship between it's either full or it's empty.
Yeah.
Creates I'm just going to grab all I can because I don't know when it's going to be gone.
Right. Yeah. And someone decides what the baby needs.
Understanding that if I'm nice to the people around me, my needs will be met in a more forthcoming way than if I'm mean to people. And some people learn to have their needs met by manipulating. And some people learn to have their needs met by being kind.
Right. That's very interesting.
Children's first efforts at having their needs met is to be endearing to their mother, to their parents.
Yeah.
Aren't I cute? Look at me smile, and they're very engaging. If they try that and it doesn't work, then they have to try something else. And, they slip into manipulation, bullying, bad behavior, because being nice didn't work.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to use power over to get what I want because cooperation didn't work for me. So now I have to do what I can to become powerful. And powerful has to have different meanings, of course, but I'm talking about a powerful that means lack of regard for others.
Right. True. Yeah. Yeah. I start thinking about war and the aggression in adult, let's say, men who want to create wars. Possibly there wasn't enough breastfeeding going on. I mean, there's other issues too. There's other issues.
Dr. Odent, Michel Odent, wrote an interesting book about cesarean sections.
Okay.
And he said, the problem is not the occasional cesarean section.
Okay.
Because, it's better than, the problem is when the cesarean section becomes a cultural norm.
Okay.
Because there are things about the cesarean section relationship between the mom and the baby that reduces the release of hormones, which create a feeling of warmth and love. And when the baby is born, the baby is supposed to get a rush of feel-good hormones.
Right.
From the mother's body.
Right.
Extreme orgasm. The baby goes, whoa, that was great. And so that's one of their first out of the womb experiences is, wow, that was really something.
Yeah.
And when the baby is born by cesarean, there's probably medication involved, and the baby is born going, the baby is drugged.
Lethargic. Yeah.
Yes. And they don't get this incredible first experience with their outside world.
Yeah.
And that can reduce the experience of love in that culture. Now, if 1% of women have cesarean sections and the babies and the mothers are denied this pivotal experience, it can be soothed and it can be
remedy later on
by all the people who are loving on their kids, and you pattern yourself after the things that you see in your environment. And over their kids and really likes doing this, they're going to go, well, I'm going to go over my kids and really likes doing this. But if it's a cesarean-based culture, then everybody's shared allegiance is to kids are really tedious.
Yeah.
I think I need to get away from my child, or I think my child is not meeting my needs properly, or
ready or a burden. Yeah, we'll have to get into like our next time. We could wrap this up in maybe 10 minutes, but there's so much more to talk about our next time. The first time mom who's exhausted because she's not used to being up every 2 or 3 hours. There's
very quickly. Can I do that?
Yes, go ahead.
Exhaustion for the new mom is universal.
Okay.
Anytime I see something that's universal, I ask myself, how does this serve?
Okay.
There must be a reason for this feeling of universal exhaustion. There must be a good reason for it. What could it be?
Yeah.
Being bone-jarring exhausted makes us far more willing to meet the needs of our child sooner rather than later, stamina to resist them.
Okay.
Now, was that a real okay, or I didn't quite get it okay?
That for me was a little opposite of my experience. Well, it worked both ways for me. When I was exhausted, I tried to meet my baby's needs, but then I also hit a point where I'm a walking zombie. I need to sleep. Here, Bob, can you just take Mikey and walk around to try to soothe him? So I had two things going on because I actually was very tired for 4 or 5 years with my youngest. The first 5, for some reason, it seemed to, I got into a routine. I was okay because I had experienced what it means to be tired in my early 20s. I was an Army officer for a short period of time, and there were times where I had to do like all night duty. So I know what it is like to sacrifice. For my job, I had to sacrifice. I had to be awake. I knew that. But many of today's young millennials are used to an entitled society where they sleep when they want to sleep. They go on a trip when they want to go. And then having a baby is very kind of shocking to their universe. So, but my youngest child seemed to need more. But I did breastfeed my 2 youngest for 5.5 years. So I definitely realized, let everything else go. The baby's most important. And I was able to adjust to it. So when you say that was true in some accounts and not true on others.
Well, this is what I loved so much about the magazine and so much about these conversations is if it makes sense to you, or even if a portion of it makes sense to you, then that's something that you'll want to have another helping of.
Yes.
If it doesn't appeal to you or it doesn't make sense to you, you want to push it to the side of your plate and try something else.
Yeah. But I do believe
I had a neighbor who was feeling, that bone jarring exhaustion. And I explained to her that one of the purposes of this from my perspective, is it helps the mother to want to meet the needs of her child earlier rather than later, because she needs to get back to sleep. And she said, oh, that makes so much sense.
It does
But
make
of course, she didn't have several children. This was her first child. So she didn't have to match this with what was my experience before.
True. And I'm also, I would consider myself a selfish person. There were times where I was hungry or I had to go to the bathroom, and I ate first before my kids when they were older. So perhaps part of my response to, feeling run down and tired, I need to take care of myself first sometimes. But anyways, yeah, you're right.
And how many of us have peed on the toilet while we were nursing our baby?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah, lots of kids following you around. Yeah, no problem with that. So I don't know. The topic was, is breastfeeding compatible with a civilized society?
First, we have to find now, what does civilized mean? Now, when the Europeans came to the United States and learned the language of some of the native people here, they were talking about what it was like back in Europe. And one of the things that was one of the questions that was asked of this tribe was, where are your orphanages? And there were no orphanages because there was no such thing as an orphan.
Yeah.
If the parents died, then the uncle wanted them, or the sister wanted them, or somebody always wanted the child, because children were valued, children were treasured, children were appreciated. But there were all kinds of orphanages in Europe during the same period of time.
Okay.
And so, which culture was more civilized?
Yeah, interesting. To me, a civilized culture is a culture that loves its human beings, treats them well, and everybody is wanted. It's civilization to me does not mean we have greater technology. We have advanced civilization is peace to me. Less killing, more love, less killing, less competition.
People want to get along.
Yeah.
People want to have lively exchanges.
And we care about the good of the other. You care about the good of the other.
One of the most civilized cultures that I've read about was the Pygmies.
Yeah.
And I may be wrong, but I think the Pygmies are gone now because they were overridden by people who were less cultured or less civilized.
Okay.
And one thing the Pygmies did was, they birthed, by their own efforts. They used gravity to give birth. They breastfed. They lived off of the abundance of the forests. And they did fine until explorers found them, and they to overwhelm and eventually destroy, because everything in them was, so what can I do for you? Do you need anything? Sure, we'll share our food with you. Anything you want, just ask. And that I guess it would have been Europeans. They just took and took and took and took and took until there were no more pygmies.
Wow.
Because they didn't have the skills to defend themselves. Just like during my last 45 years, I did not have the skills to deal with a gaslighter because I didn't know that such a thing even existed. If I had some experience with it early on, or somebody had explained it to me early on, I would have been more prepared.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know this existed. And so, I was a sitting duck for all that time, even though I'm, a reasonably intelligent person. I bought into that it was all my fault.
Yeah, you didn't know about it. You
didn't know about it.
Just didn't know about it.
The Inuit is another example. The only way they could survive is to get along.
Yeah.
And war is a luxury a civilized society cannot afford.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, crime, you just think of crime in a civilized society. You won't have crime. You won't have people oppressing people. One group of people thinking they know better and they want everybody to follow a certain mandate, an oppressor and the oppressed.
This is another Inuit story. In their language, they had 600 different words for snow.
Wow.
But they had no word for theft.
See, look at that.
And if somebody needed a spear and they didn't have one or didn't have time to make one, they would take their neighbors.
Yeah.
And the neighbor would say, oh, my spear is gone. I bet somebody needed it. They'll replace it when they're done, or they'll make me a new one, or I'll make myself a new one.
Right.
But
there's trust.
That they had been harmed because someone needed their spear at that moment.
Yeah.
They thought that, they wouldn't have taken it unless they really needed it.
Right.
And so their feeling of community was, I'll either make myself another one or they'll bring it back.
Yeah. Trust. They didn't need lawyers. They did not need lawyers or mediators. They just had a flow of compassion and trust.
And if somebody was behaving badly, they would have probably had a very considerate way of dealing with that as well.
Yeah.
Like maybe they would have an intervention saying, you can't treat people like that.
Okay.
Because, if we all treated each other with that level of disrespect, we wouldn't survive.
Yeah. Chaos. Around the world, there's chaos in cultures where there's dishonesty. Yeah, I can.
Speaking of dishonesty, I noticed this the other day when I was reading an article about families.
Yeah.
And I saw something in there I'd never seen before, and that was LIES.
Lies. Yeah.
And if family represents a certain configuration of lies that have to be maintained generation after generation after generation, then that society as a whole cannot be called civilized.
Are you talking about families that conceal certain things going on in their family and it's lied and not dealt with and communicated, such as molestation or incest, lies? Okay.
Or the lie that there's never enough. Okay. There is never enough. So you got to go out there and get yours before somebody else does. And the truth in a civilized society is there's always enough. All we have to do is share.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been great talking with you. I know you have many stories to share. We'll have to do a part 2 on this, maybe next week or next time. And thank you so much.
I love comments and questions and more interaction with people who have wondered about something. And you're not right, and I'm not right. Yeah. But we have had the luxury. We have given ourselves a luxury of contemplating these things.
Yeah.
And I love the process of figuring things out. And I also love finding out that I was wrong.
Okay.
And then I can refine and amend my ideas. I'm not stuck, with I believe this and I've always believed it and I'm never going to change. If someone introduces me to a bit of information I hadn't had before, I can incorporate that and either change my ideas or modify them. And it's not a difficult, painful thing to do.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that a more civilized society is able to do, is understand another person's perspective without resistance, even if you don't agree.
In general, our culture is very divisive. You're happy not to be on social media. People are losing friendships, Jody, over differences of opinions and very stern attitudes and opinions. I mean, 40-year friendships are coming unglued because someone tells you, don't go outside, it's dangerous. If you go outside, don't even bother, this friendship's over pretty much. And it's I had someone
advise me about this shelter at home thing. And I could see her point, and I agreed with her.
Yeah.
But I'm still okay with what I'm doing, and I still see family.
Right.
And I think we've got enough shared germs that we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I don't kiss people as much as I used to, and I don't shake hands with strangers. I'll tap or do the elbow thing.
Yeah.
I'm considerate of their sensibilities because I don't know what they are.
Correct. Yeah.
So I'm going to do what I can to create a comfort level in them where they don't have to feel like they have to back off.
Right. Correct. Okay. All right, Jody, it's been great talking to you. We'll do this again.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Bye.
Take care.
Okay.